Good morning and welcome to the Courage Coalition. Today, I am excited to introduce our guest for two reasons. She has a story that is so courageous, but even more than that, she was courageous enough to come on a podcast for the first time. And it really was hard. But when we step into the hard, we remind ourselves of the why. So Tiffaney Childers is a accountant turned coach, speaker, and author, and she empowers suicide loss survivors. And that just it hits me right in the heart because we've just wrapped up Mental Health Awareness Month, and there were so many really raw stories that month. This is such a beautiful gift to bring the guests. Maybe they've experienced it. They've experienced someone in their circle. Maybe them themselves have considered. And I think that your story, your strength, your courage is a gift. So welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, Tiffaney, where are you at in the country?
I live in Amarillo, Texas,
And have you
up
been
in the
there your whole life?
Panhandle.
Yeah, you've been there your whole
Mhm.
life?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. The Panhandle. I've never been down to that part of Texas.
You know the George Strait song, Amarillo by Morning? That
Yes.
is where I live.
That's where you live. Oh, I love that. And I love me some
Yeah.
George, man.
Yeah.
He was one of my first heartthrobs,
Oh, me too. Me too.
right? Like a good old fashioned cowboy.
The old country. Yes.
Yes, exactly. So I gave you a very general introduction. I love my guests to introduce themselves because you better than anyone else. And it doesn't come down to words, it comes down to heart.
So my name is Tiffaney Childers. I lost both of my parents to suicide. And this has been about 18 years ago. So I lost my mom, and then 1 year and 5 days later, I lost my dad. And that was 18 years ago. So back then, we didn't have any of the resources that we have now. We didn't have support groups or Instagram accounts that talk about mental health. We didn't have podcasts like this to get the word out and for survivors to get help. Um, so like I said, that was 18 years ago. And then I call the rest of this time the messy middle, where I just threw myself into raising kids and a marriage and, trying to start a career, which was really hard because for a long time I just shoved everything down and I just avoided all the pain. And um, 8 months ago, I had a routine hip surgery, and it was just a labral tear repair on my hip. I had been in pain for about 3 years and finally decided to have the surgery. And I ended up with CRPS, which is chronic regional pain syndrome. So that I felt like every emotional thing that I had shoved down for so many years came out physically in my body.
Oh, truth.
So I'm dealing with that. Like I said, it's only been about 8 months, so I'm pretty new to this, and just trying to just trying to navigate my life through the pain. But about 5 years ago, I became part of what's called a loss team, and that's stands for Local Outreach to Suicide Survivors. So we volunteer, and I go on call to a suicide call. We were there within 15 minutes of the suicide call to help loved ones left behind navigate the absolute worst day of their life. Um, we don't try to fix anything, just our presence. If they need anything, it could be as simple as letting the dogs out who were barking and going crazy. I've held babies, I've fed babies, so mama can, you're going to make me cry.
I know, but
Um, I have done a lot. So just being there. And it's something that I wish I had 18 years ago when this happened, because back then you just didn't have anything, and
right,
nobody just to sit with you.
right.
We give them resources, and it's as simple as, look at this later when everything calms down, how to write an obituary. If you need scene restoration, some of them need cleanup. We contract with a bunch of companies here in Amarillo who go out and do scene restoration, and we will pay for that because it is very expensive. Um, if you need a hotel room for the night, if you need to get out of the house and you need somewhere just for you and the kids to stay, or we pay for a hotel room, we help you pack up and get you loaded and get you safe. And uh, it's just so rewarding for me, even though the tragedy of it, I have so much compassion for anybody that is left behind to deal with the mess, because not a lot of people think about the minutes afterwards and the hours afterwards and the shock that you go through, um, and just being there for people.
Yeah. We hear it said a lot, but I think what you're saying is such a beautiful example of is your heartbreak is your why. And you
Absolutely.
think about like the heartbreak. How old were you when your parents committed
I
suicide?
was 29 years old and 29 and 30.
And I just think about that. I have a 31-year-old and the devastation, the heartbreak that would happen if if my husband and I chose to,
Yeah.
to end our lives.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart. It literally breaks my heart. But the reason you saw the tears is that I haven't experienced suicide in my family, but a very, very good friend of mine did. And when you're talking about that, I was picturing she called me. I was just getting out of the hair salon and the panic, the fear, the just everything in her voice. I could hear it. And like the afterthought of us gathering, she actually did not lose her husband. He um, was not successful. I don't know if that's the right word because that in itself is adds to the heartbreak in some ways because he will no longer ever be able to be a part of their home because of the damage. So he didn't get to ask for help, or get help afterwards. And it's one of the reasons I feel so strongly that we have to start having these conversations
Oh, we do. It's my
because like you
passion.
said, it happened all those years ago, 18 years ago, and nobody was there to even say, how do I know how to feel?
Oh,
Right? Let
got
alone
it.
the
Yeah.
hard facts of cleaning up blood off of a floor,
Yeah.
right?
Blood, brain matter,
Brain matter. Yeah.
everything.
And we just,
Hazmat
yeah.
situation. Yeah.
And we
You
don't
don't
think
think
about
about
it,
all the things that these people have to go through.
right?
It's
And
heartbreaking.
there's,
I see my younger self on these calls, in the eyes of a young man that's lost his dad, or the eyes of a wife that's lost her husband. I see my younger self, and that's why I keep on doing what I do.
yeah.
Uh,
Walk us through a little bit. I mean, you began to talk about the process of loss. And I just think that I'm assuming this is a nonprofit.
yes,
It is. Okay.
yes,
So
yes,
if you're listening to this and you have a heartstring, donate, you guys. Nonprofit
yes,
works,
yes,
they need their
yes.
community.
We
So,
do. We do
um,
so much. And there's a lost team. We're trying to get lost teams in every city. Some places don't have them,
right.
but we're trying to get one in every city. And we just, yeah,
And it's
donate,
interesting.
volunteer,
Do
do
you know
anything.
if there are any in the state of Oregon?
I don't, but I sure can sure look it up.
Yeah, because that's where our experience happened, and nothing like that, to my knowledge, was available. And what a gift that would have been for my friend and her daughter, right? So, um, yeah, I just think so. Walk us a little bit through just what loss does. Like I said, so you guys come in at that last minute or after the minute, and you're really helping with just some of the hands-on support. We're not trying to fix anything because there's no fixing it. That's clear and upright. But it's little things, like you said, just the things that have to get done in order for you to begin that really long journey. Um, how can others, maybe they're listening, what is your expert opinion? And I know you're not going to say you're not an expert, but you are an expert because you've lived it and you walk through it all the time with others on what are those first things that, as a friend, a family member, they can do to help the tragedy.
Just be with somebody. Just sit there. Just be in presence with them because you're not going to say anything that's going to fix what they're going through. But just knowing that someone is there sitting with you. I did have a good friend whenever my dad left this world. Then her and her dad came over and they just sat with me until they brought the body out. That meant more to me than anything they could ever say because you're not going to say the right words
No.
at all. So just being present and staying present in their life. And it's so sad, but I've always said this after a suicide, strangers become friends and friends become strangers.
Oh, that can
And
be really hard.
only because people just don't know what to say, they don't know what to do. And everybody avoids conversations. And eventually they kind of just fade out of your life. So that's another hard part. You lose all the secondary losses that come after a suicide. The loss of your house, loss of a job, the loss of friends, the
The loss
loss
of
of the
security.
safety of
Yeah.
being in this world
Yeah.
and navigating without your loved one there. There's so many secondary losses,
Yes.
but just stick it out with somebody, just be there. And I would tell anybody that's going through a loss also, reach out, stay in community, don't isolate. Break the silence. Find one safe person, two safe people that you can text or call and say, you know what, I'm not okay right now. Can you come sit with me? You don't have
So
to say anything.
what keeps coming up right here, and I want to dive into this deep because the series we did on mental health, we talked a lot about this, but this is so critical. I feel like in this talk about mental health and suicide is expectations. We assume, and this goes both ways. One, as a survivor, you assume that you should heal in a certain way. And as the community that is surrounding your human, you expect them to do things in a certain way. And what I've realized is that that makes me so angry, right? Because those expectations are not ours. The only expectations you should have are for yourself. So ask yourself, how do I want to show up? How do I want to support this person? How do I want to heal? And if you don't have the answer, that's okay. But we create these timelines, right? Of what it looks like. And it's such a tragedy.
So, the stages of grief that are out there, the stages of grief were actually designed for someone who was actually dying, not for someone who is going through a loss. So, the stages of grief are everybody thinks you need to check off a box. Okay, I've got through the acceptance, I've got through denial, I've got through bargaining, let's check it off and then I can go on to the next one. And that's just not the case. It is a big monster loop of, I go back to bargaining every single morning, like, okay, God, all right, if I do this, 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 and this, and then you can give me this, and then we'll get, and then by the end of the day, I'm back at acceptance. Like, okay, here we are. I've accepted it. And then I go back to denial. Uh, It's not a staircase, the stages of grief. It is a big monster loop that you can turn circles in from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. And that goes with pain too. I find that, with pain also, and not just a loss, a suicide loss. The stages of grief are the same. You're going to go in and out of them periodically all day long.
Right. So when if someone's listening or when you're speaking with someone, counseling someone, holding someone's hand, you're a coach. And I think what most people don't realize is that we actually, so many of us are coaches in different ways, right? But you have found your very specific purpose. And that is such a gift, even though it comes with tragedy, right? It is such a gift to be able to do this.
It is.
How do you help people walk through that? And I say people with great rage, right? Because we're talking about children also. And maybe you're not dealing with children specifically all the time, but that is always going to be my heart, is how do I help a child, right? How do I help a child? And how do you help them see that they get to choose how it looks? It doesn't give them the permission to use it as a crutch, because I think we tend to do that, right? Like, I'm just so depressed, right? And I am the first person, anyone that's listened to this will say, I will support you, but I will not allow you to use it as an excuse, because we all get to choose every single day. And I'm not talking about day one, you guys.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm just talking about
Yeah.
like the cycle,
Yeah.
as you're so
Yeah.
beautifully talking about here, Tiffany, is that we can get wrapped up in this cycle of repeating versus healing. And we have to feel it. We have to get down and dirty in order to heal the wound. And as you said, how it broke open your chronic pain that came so much later in life, broke open everything that you didn't feel.
Yes. That emotional pain turned physical when my body said, okay, you're going to hear me now.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to hear this emotional pain. And it did. And I'm kind of the same way as you. Like, you have to dig down deep and you have to work on yourself. You truly do, or you will stay stuck in the sadness, in the you will stay stuck. And you have to dig deep and find like so deep healing, or you're never going to get out of it. And of course, the initial shock and all that, I mean, that's going to last years.
Yeah.
That lasts years. And you're going to ask yourself the whys, the what ifs, the what if I did this? And what if I just called them just, 10 minutes before? Why? You ask yourself the question why all the time. I still ask why, and this has been 18 years, but you're never going to get that question answered ever, ever. There's no answers. And so I think that's a lot of time that people feel like there's no closure,
Right.
and you have to find the closure, and you have to make something of your life. You do, because you can get so stuck. And trust me, I was stuck. So I've been there, done that.
Yeah.
I did a lot of, people tend to do a lot of unhealthy things to deal with the pain,
Yeah.
drinking, drug use, any kind of thing you can do to get it off of your mind.
To tap it down, to mute it,
Yeah.
to calm it.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I think, as we're moving through this, what we have to really make sure is clear is that there's actually nothing you could have done. Because when a person is at a point of committing suicide, they actually aren't thinking in a way that is reasonable. Everyone's like, well, no, I was thinking very clearly. I was done. That's not actually clearly. And I'm not saying that as judgment is that when we're thinking clearly, we begin to think of all the reasons why we shouldn't, right? The daughter, the husband, whatever it is, right? That's actually clearly, because that's when our heart and our mind are working together, not just our mind. And we have to be able to understand that there is really nothing anybody could do. But what we can do is start having these conversations,
Yes. Break
right?
the silence.
Break the
Break the
silence,
silence. As
remove the stigma,
Yeah.
because there's such a stigma that it prevents people from wanting to talk about it. Well,
Yes.
what did you do wrong? If your child committed suicide, what did you do wrong? Right? Or your dad committed suicide, whatever it is, I'm sure you went through all those
Oh,
emotions of
yes.
what did
Yes.
I do wrong?
Yeah.
What did I do? All the
Yeah.
things. Why am I
Yeah.
not good enough?
Yes. You blame yourself. Yeah. And the
Absolutely.
shame that comes with it. So Dr. Frank Campbell, who started the Loss team, he has come up with this saying, not everybody that has a mental health diagnosis dies by suicide. and not everybody that dies by suicide had a mental health diagnosis. There's so many circumstances surrounding these deaths, and sometimes it's the perfect storm. There could be medication that people are taking, pain pills, antidepressants that rewire your brain, that get you down in such a depression that you can't even fathom getting up out of it. There's so many circumstances that surround these deaths that, and as of 2023, because 2024 statistics haven't come out yet, guns are the
Number one
method of choice.
method of choice. Yeah.
And
And
it's
why do you think that
so
is?
irreversible.
Yeah.
It's you don't have time to change your mind.
Right.
Breaks my heart.
And why do you have this any of the studies shown why they think it is? Because when I stop and think about that, I think about, oh, that's gonna be, I don't think I can do it that way. That is like, that is just, oh, a gun, a bullet. But it is the number one. Do you think it's because they feel like it's the most successful?
Yes. Yes.
So yeah.
It's successful and it's usually permanent.
Yeah. And except for when it's not. And
Yep.
that's what
And
I,
that's
shared with
which,
you in
yeah,
the beginning is
your
that,
friend has dealt with. Yeah,
yeah, except for when it's not. And then nothing will ever be the same.
exactly.
And nothing was solved. Not that suicide solves anything, because it doesn't, but it actually just, it just complexed the problem as a whole.
Exactly. So
So
one suicide affects at least 135 people.
wow.
Teachers, coworkers, um, friends, family, acquaintances, neighbors. One suicide affects 135 people.
That is
And isn't
so
that just like when you put it into that perspective of how many people that have to deal with this and um, struggle
right, because
with the acceptance of the loss?
yes, because you're not it's not solving, it's act like I said, it's, I think there's times where like it would just be better if I wasn't here. But in turn, we don't think about, and that's that reasoning, like I was saying, we don't think about what it actually does to those that we think we're protecting,
No,
right?
because you're not in your right mind. You're not sober minded.
No,
And I don't want to use the word sober minded, but clear headed.
yes,
Let's say that. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
And it's also the fact that there is always a way out, I think is what I want to say. There's always a way out of what you're feeling, of what you're dealing with. I think about, you know, financial ruins. I think there's a lot of statistic about when someone loses everything financially and they feel like
yes,
it's the only way out. But there's always a way out,
absolutely,
always.
absolutely,
And so it's always asking ourselves, like, the people that are left, the 135 people, are they worth me hitting rock bottom
absolutely.
to get onto the other
Yes,
side? And I want to address something you brought up because we talk about mental health and drug abuse, alcohol. Um, what I want to say is communication abuse. Like you said, we just don't talk about anything. We just hold it all in, and how devastating that can be to the big picture, and that it really doesn't mute anything. It doesn't actually quiet the voices. It will the first time, and that's the problem. And then you'll maybe do more to make the second time a little bit quieter, and then more. And that is the cycle of addiction. And it's also the cycle of um, heartbreak. And I say that because I really feel like when we, even if we don't use drugs and we don't use alcohol, when we don't talk about it,
yep.
it is almost, if
It's
not just,
toxic.
yeah, it's just as devastating. And so I want to go into this a little bit because we're going to move right into chronic pain and how life altering chronic pain is and can be. And when I shared the story of my friend, I truly believe that was a part of her husband's why, because of chronic pain. I'm
Yes,
not going to say it was his only why. I'm just going to say it was part of his why.
yes,
And how devastating it can be to the human psyche. I grew
Absolutely.
up with a father who had chronic pain and used it as a crutch. It's why I'm an asshole. It's why I do this. It's why I do that. And he was addicted to prescription meds because the
Opioids, yeah.
doctors, yeah, the doctors
They
just were
handed them
not
out like
prescribing.
candy back then, like
Yes.
Halloween candy. Here,
Yep. Here's
what do
some
you
more.
need?
Yep.
Mhm, mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and it changed the trajectory of my life. It changed the trajectory of his
When it
life.
changes that person, you
Right.
see them change right before your eyes.
Absolutely. And he was a recovering alcoholic, but he really didn't recover because he just changed methods. Right.
Yeah, one addiction for the other.
So, talk to us a little bit about what you have found in, chronic pain, addiction, and suicide. Maybe it's your own personal experience, but I really want to start talking about this more because it's going to come back to the same thing as choice.
Um, and this isn't something that I'm proud of, but I drank for years because I needed to numb. And I didn't drink every day, but when I did drink, I mean, it was to numb. It was to not feel anything because that was the only way I could make it through my days. And like I said, like not every day, but boy, sometimes it sure does help numb that and all those feelings. So whenever I had this surgery, they send you home with all sorts of opioids and pain pills and all this stuff. And 2 days later, when the nerve block wore off, I mean, you talk about pain. Like, my God, I've never felt this pain. So it wasn't in my hip, it was in my foot, which is so bizarre.
Yeah.
Yeah, my toes. And it felt like my toes had been mutilated in a boat motor. Like, that's the only way I could describe it to my husband. Like, I feel like should look at my foot and there should be just blood and guts and tendons. And it was absolutely horrific. Like, I can't even explain it. And so, go back to the doctor and they're like, gosh, I don't know. I mean, I was just totally, it was totally medical gaslighting. I went to 5 different doctors. Like, I don't know maybe it's nerve damage. Maybe it's this, but here's some more pills. Here's some more pills. Here's some more pills. So I'd finally gone to this pain doctor here and he gave me, some pills, said, go home, take two of this, because you have to get your pain under control. Like, you have to, like, your body's shutting down. The pain is so bad. And just to kind of put CRPS on a pain scale, like, it is the number one on the pain scale. It's worse than childbirth. It is worse than having an amputation. It is worse than the pain from cancer. Like, it is, and it's constant. There's not like you have one day where you're like, gosh, I feel great and I don't have pain. Sometimes the pain is worse than others. But so, anyways, I trusted my doctors and I went home and I took two of this and two of that. And well, I lost consciousness. It was too much for my body. So I wake up and I'm like, God, why am I on the floor? So right then and there, I thought, nope, not going to do it. And I literally had kind of come full circle, like, because where my mom was at, my mom had a lot of chronic illnesses and issues, and that's what they did to her, and pain pills and pain pills. And then they had given her like the methadone patches, which are basically a synthetic form of heroin. And so, I saw somebody change right before my eyes. So I just, at that point, I thought, no, I can't do this. I can't. I had come full circle and thought, I can't do this. I'm going to have to figure out something, um, some way around the pain without the pills, because they truly rewire your brain. They truly do. So yeah, firsthand experience on that. And I promise you will spend your whole life savings trying to find a solution for this pain.
So true.
It's like no pain I've ever had in my entire life. So finally, I was diagnosed with CRPS after about 5 doctors. So I was diagnosed by 2 doctors.
And how long did it take
Finally.
you to get your diagnosis?
6 months. Yeah,
Which
6 months.
is actually record time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I really was kind of shocked. But in that 6 months, I mean, I tried everything. I would have drank horse piss if you'd have told me it'd make me feel better. And you go to a lot of people that say I can fix you and you spend thousands of dollars and
Nothing.
no,
Nothing.
no.
So the truth here is though is that it's a choice. And that's why I wanted you to kind of share your story a little bit because you picked yourself up off that floor literally. and
Literally.
had to make a choice right then and there.
Yes.
And when I think about this, I want people to hear them say, like, whether you are, have suffered from someone that you love committing suicide, whether you're in the realms of chronic pain that is creating suicidal thoughts. I mean, I could go on, but it's a choice every day. I remember one of the very first podcasts that I was a guest on, and it was about chronic pain. And when I walked away from that podcast, I realized something. I realized that they actually wanted me to talk about how bad it was. They really wanted the horrors of chronic pain. And that's not what I gave them. And it was fine. It wasn't like a bad conversation or anything, but it was just this really interesting realization that I actually have gotten to the point where I have to say thank you to my pain a lot.
Yes.
And people are like, that doesn't make any sense. Well, it does, because it's about
Yes.
mindset. But I actually was able to say thank you in a whole new way recently. And so I want to talk about this, because this is part of, I'm going to dive deep into your how and those things that have worked for you, or not worked 100%, but worked partly. But one of the things I realized recently is that because I have struggled with chronic pain since I was 24, so that is 26 years now, more time than I spent without it. I have realized that so many of my peers, I just turned 50. So we think about being 50, and it's like your body starts doing some funky things, right?
Turned 52.
So, like we
Yeah.
all, our bodies start
Yeah.
going through these things. And
Yeah.
what I realized is that none of it has been really that hard for me. And when I was reflecting on that one day, I realized why. It's because I had already become friends with my pain. Right? I had already learned how to say, "Oh, well, I see you. I see you. I don't really like you. I see you. What are you trying to tell me?" Because you had mentioned that, of your pain, your your mental pain came out as physical pain later in life. And I know you've read it, I'm sure, and most people have, we've talked about it before, is that our body remembers. And we call that, oh, that's too, woo woo for me. The truth of the matter is that there is actually science
There absolutely
behind,
is.
yes, trauma and pain, whether it was mental trauma or physical trauma, doesn't matter,
Yes.
and how our
Yes.
body holds on to it. And when we push it down, when we don't feel it, when we don't get curious about it, it will come out in different ways. And it's not just our pain, it's generational pain. And so when I think about that for you, right, you have a mother and a father who were obviously in extreme amounts of pain that maybe never got dealt with, talked about, all those things. Then you add yours onto it. We're not even talking about your grandparents or in utero pain, right? We hear a lot of this, and it's like, oh, that is just so woo, that cannot be true. And it is so true. It is
I
so
think
right.
so too.
Yeah.
I do too.
So let's talk about how you started breaking that cycle, right? Because that's what you did. You broke the
I
cycle
did.
of,
I
no,
did.
this is not my story. I
Yeah.
refuse for this to be my story.
Yeah.
I broke that cycle, right?
Yeah.
I remember getting off all the pain meds because all I could
Mm-hmm.
see was my dad,
Yep.
and that was not going to be
And
my
then
story.
you're just not clear headed. I'm sorry, but you're just not clear headed. And,
No.
I knew I couldn't work, because I was still in accounting, and I'm still in accounting just a little bit because you and I are kind of like numbers nerds.
Yes.
That's why I love you so much. I love your platform. We're numbers nerds.
Yep.
So yeah, and I had to quit drinking, and I knew that. And so kind of this hip surgery would really knocked me into not drinking. But I tell you what, you have to really change your life and your lifestyle and who you hang around with and the places that you go. And it's a lonely road.
Yeah.
It is a very lonely road. I'm not going to lie. So I was listening to a podcast, and somebody had mentioned Amberly
Oh,
in
okay.
her book. And so that was right when Joy Through the Journey had come out. And so I thought, oh, I got to get that book. The book changed my life. And I know that is the main goal of why Amberly wrote that book, because it literally changed my life. And, we talked about helping one person.
Yep.
That girl in that book just saved me. It did. Because I
And
thought, well, we can have
can you
joy and
see
pain
can you
at the
see the
same
hair
time, and it
sticking
can
up?
coexist. Do what?
I said, can you hear that? Can you see the hair sticking up on my arm?
Yes, I know. I know. Um, Pain and joy can coexist, and I think that's what I struggled with for a long time. After my parents, I was really struggling with. Gosh, I should still be sad and
Mm,
upset, but gosh, I mean, I've got joy here, and I don't want to think want anybody to think like during the messy middle of raising my kids and all that there it was all sadness. I mean, there was so much joy.
right.
I've raised thriving kids that are kind and great human beings. Um, but yeah, so bought the book, got in Amberly's book club, and it changed my life. And that's why I'm sitting here on this podcast today.
You know,
Absolutely changed.
the power of curiosity is something that I believe so deeply in my soul because, you know, when we're on these journeys, we're constantly asking ourselves, well, who could tell me the answer?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Who's the person that's going to give me all the information? And I hate to tell you this, but the answer you already have. It's inside of you. But you have to be willing to hear it, to hear her, to hear
yes,
him.
yes,
You have to be able to say, there's a reason my eyes were drawn to that book.
yes,
There's a reason
yes,
why I want to follow this person. And you guys, I this is not all about seriousness either. You maybe you want to follow someone on Instagram because they make you laugh.
yes,
Listen,
exactly.
you need to laugh,
Yes,
right?
you have got to.
But
Yes,
that the power it's I always say this, I'm probably going to get it backwards, but you have to have the curiosity to be courageous and the courage to be curious because
yes,
you're going to have to get outside of anything that maybe you've ever done,
yes,
anything you've ever been taught. Because we're going to talk
yes,
about medicine right now, right? Like
yeah,
Western
mhm,
medicine
yeah,
says
yeah,
X, and you're going to actually go against almost all of it as
yes,
you walk your journey. You're
yes,
going to have to have the courage and curiosity to say, what if I say this out loud? And then the expectations that we've already talked about. It's
and
not
there's a lot of pushback. There's a lot of
yes,
pushback
there's a
when you
lot of
choose not to do antidepressants and you choose not to do pain medicine.
yeah,
People can't understand why. And
right.
my pain doctor even said, I mean, I don't understand why you want to be in pain, and there's nothing else we can do for you. I mean, that was simple. But of course, the spinal stimulator, which I am, still debating that, but
Yeah.
that's when people kind of draw the line. There's nothing else we can do for you, and you
And
have to dig down deep
yeah,
and find things. I started walking. I thought, well, I'm going to sit here and be in pain anyways. I
right.
might as well get up and walk a little bit. And then, at first I could walk down the street and come right back. That's it. I was exhausted. My feet hurt so bad and would flare up and turn purple and blue. And um, it just started with that. And I thought, okay, I did that. All right, what else can I do? Just going outside, standing in the grass, getting the sunshine. You just, guy, you got to dig deep.
What you eat, what you drink,
Absolutely.
what you expose yourself to. We brought up the social media. You have to ask yourself, are you really doing things to improve yourself? Or is this actually making it worse? And that goes back to that podcast I was talking about. We can surround ourselves by people that say it's the worst pain in the world and it has stopped my
Yep.
life. And that was
Yep.
my dad, right?
Yep.
Or we can surround ourselves with like people like Amberly,
Yes.
who have literally had 36 operations, also has CRPS, and does not allow it to change her life. It
Absolutely.
it is a part of her journey. It is a part of her story, but it does not get to be the boss.
Yep.
And that
And
is the
it's
question we
mindset.
yeah.
It's totally mindset.
And
Or
you have
you
to be
will.
able to be willing to say, not today, Not today. And when we're talking about practitioners, when we're talking about judgment, family stories, and this, you guys, this is not just about pain. I want you to, it's this circle. It's how we look at everything we're doing. If if something's not working for you, you have to be willing to say, but what can, and not give up when it doesn't work, because the first thing isn't going to work. The
Yep.
second thing, it
Yep.
may be 15 years down the road. I can I can remember being 25 years old and having those suicidal thoughts because I was 25 and I'm not diagnosed with a mental health. I've never been diagnosed with mental
Yeah.
health, to your point that you said
Yep.
earlier, right? But I
Yep.
remember laying on my couch and the pain being so bad that laying down hurt. So I rolled off because I thought I got to get up. I couldn't get up. I had to go to the bathroom, but I felt like if I walked, I might fall down. So I crawled to the bathroom. And everybody was just take more medicine. I was on nine meds at the time, one of them for Parkinson's disease, which I did not have Parkinson's disease. And I was 25 with two very young little boys at home.
Kids.
And I
Yep.
thought, if this is my life, I'm sorry, F it. I'm
Yep.
done.
Yep.
I can't do this. This
Yep.
is this is not living. This is not living. But it broke something in me right then and there with no knowledge. I grew up in a Western medicine home. My mom was an RN. Um, I grew up with my dad in another home, but my dad just taking meds. I had to really ask God, help me help myself, because nothing I know or have ever known is actually going to work. And I will say, like, the first blessing was my physician at the time. The diagnosis was a very political diagnosis for many years, but he knew me prior to the diagnosis and he knew what had happened to my life. And he advocated for me. And when I said, I'm done with medicine, help me get away from it, he's like, oh, I don't know, but if you're sure, let's do this.
And that's
And
incredible.
it is. It's incredible. And he helped me. He when I would come to him and say, "What about this?" He'd be like, "Whoa, let's try it." Right?
Yeah.
There was never the no.
Yeah.
And it gave me the courage because I think about that. I was so young and
Oh,
so
yeah.
impressionable, right?
Yeah. And well, and you trust everything that your doctor says because we
Yes.
don't know any better. We just, okay, we trust them.
Yes. Right? We don't know. We're not doctors.
So, yeah.
But and it wasn't a quick answer. I mean, I want to say I spent the next decade honestly trying different
Trying to
things,
figure it out.
trying to find things that worked. And it really came down to one, always being curious, never saying, I know it all, and this is what's always worked. So this is about what was always going to work, because I think it changes every few years. But being
That's
curious,
true.
yeah, being curious, and then listening to what's here inside of me, because your body knows it better than anybody else. And that's our our mental health, if
Yes.
that's our
Yes.
physical health,
Yes.
if that's our spiritual health,
Yes.
relational health, I don't care what we're talking about, financial health, we're both money girls, right?
Here we are. We
We
are.
we know, people are always so shocked when we do financial coaching. I said, "Well, I don't really care about your numbers." And they're like, "What?" I said, "We get to address who you are first." And that just shocks them, right? But it all comes
I
down
love
to
it. I love your platform and I love that. It just,
because
oh,
it's
love it.
truth, right?
It's absolutely true.
If
Yeah.
we believe money is black and white, then we believe there is oceanside property in Montana,
Yeah. In
right?
Arizona.
Right.
Hey,
In Arizona.
that's a George Strait song,
It is.
Oceanfront Property in Arizona.
You know, it's like it is as personal as you are and as your thumbprint is.
Yes,
But we, as a culture, and this has been taught, so it's hard to unlearn it. And it's been
absolutely.
taught by more than one generation, is that it it looks a certain way. Our mental health does not look a certain way. I think about my immediate family and just how different, like, my son's journey has been from my husband's journey from his mother's journey, or his sister's journey, right? And how that if we just assumed it was going to look one way, everything would be different. And it
I mean,
wouldn't
we don't
be
know anything until we're taught, and we're taught by our parents.
right.
So that's really hard
It
because
is.
that's how we learn.
And they only know what was taught to them. And
Absolutely.
that's that generational cycle that we're talking about. And, this is a little tangent, but I'm going to say it, but it's the same thing when I'm talking and platforming about foster care. We
Absolutely.
we want to put them in the shame. You should know better. Says who? Who taught
Exactly.
them better?
Yeah.
It takes courage to say, I want to know better, and then curiosity to go and find those answers
Yes.
and support. And we are
Love
eliminating
it.
the support. We don't
I love it.
support
Yep.
any of them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow. I love it. Ugh.
So, what is the thing that you feel like you read Amberly's book? And then what was next? Because I mean, so many of our listeners will be like, yeah, I've read 1,200 books and I'm still stuck.
Well, I've read 1,200 books too. So it was hers. And then it was an old, old book that was written back in the 80s. And I think it was called The Mind Body Prescription.
Okay.
And I mean, it's old and it's got some, old school thinking that probably wouldn't fly today. But, went to Amberly's event and I think I was a little like overstimulated. So, because I didn't know what to expect, but I mean, it just changed my life. So now I'm writing a book about my own journey and, the one I've just sat here and talked about. So I'm in the process of writing that. I'm hoping within the next either 3 to 4 months that it'll be out.
Stop.
Life has just changed.
Yeah.
Life has just changed. And don't get me wrong, I still have my pain, but I'm able to manage it with happiness, with joy, without shame.
Without
Um,
shame.
it changed my life. The pain changed my life.
Yeah. It's being thankful. But I want you to take a step back for a second because people are like, you know, there's always the but, there's always the wall
Oh,
in
yes.
everything we do, right? So you're an accountant, you're a trained accountant.
Yes.
And you guys, as we all know, accountants are boring and they have no
Totally.
creativity. I'm being very not serious right now. They have no creativity and they only look at things one way. But the reality is that accountants, especially, I don't know. I'm not gonna say new accountants because we're kind of older.
Yes.
But you know what I
Yes.
mean? There's always the exception. So leave the stereotype at the door. I know so many women in finance that are really truly the most creative souls that I've
Yes.
ever met.
Yes.
But you're an accountant, and so we get raised with these beliefs that, well, you're an accountant, so you're a numbers nerd, stay in your lane. But here you are going to write a book, which is there's
Yes.
something so creative about
Yeah.
writing a book.
Yeah.
What what did you tell yourself, or what did somebody tell you that gave you permission? I think that's what it is because we either have to give ourselves permission or we get something from somebody else that says, "Huh, I wonder if I can do that." That
Um,
allowed you to walk into this next step, this next journey.
so, I'd mentioned that a friend and her dad, whenever my dad died, came and just sat with me. And she's always, for years and years and years, told me, you got to write a book, Tiff. You got to write a book. And I'm leaving out a lot of the
Yes.
interesting parts of it, but she's like, you got to write a book. And so I finally just thought, yeah, I have to write this. And I have to break the silence. I do. Um, and it's kind of a memoir, kind of a personal development book. And I love memoirs. I love to hear people's stories. I truly do. I love reading them. I love hearing them. And that's what makes the world go round because everybody's so different. So I finally thought, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm not getting any younger.
No. And the podcast is really I remember the very first episode and I said that I really just want people to share their stories
Yes.
because when we share our stories, we see other humans that thought they were invisible, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think that is exactly, I'm with you. I want to read stories of real people
Me
because
too. Me
it
too.
gives us permission.
Yes.
It gives us validity. It makes people realize that I'm not alone.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't
Yeah.
matter what story you're telling yourself. The truth of the matter is there's 100,000 people experiencing the same thing, but we're all too fearful, too
Yep.
shameful.
For so many years, I played small. I didn't talk. I didn't talk about it because it's shameful and it's not a conversation that people want to talk about, like suicide loss. So I played very small. I kind of made myself invisible because I didn't want to upset anybody and I didn't want to rock the boat and I didn't want to talk about it and make somebody uncomfortable. So I played so small and it stayed quiet and quiet and quiet. And I'm done playing small. So
Oh,
I'm super excited about writing this book.
I love that. I'm done
Yeah,
playing small, Tiffany. So
I am.
I ask every one of my guests, what is the definition of courage? And you wrote, courage is consistently confronting your fears daily and developing resilience to change the ending of your story. And that is literally and fictionally for you. You are going to write the
Absolutely.
story and you get to, because you've already decided to change the story. And I
Exactly.
think one of the things, yes, your friend told you to write a book, but I believe in my heart after our conversation that the reason you get to write this book is because you changed your story.
Absolutely. Because
So,
if I was still stuck, I wouldn't be writing a book. You can't,
no.
no, can't
Yeah.
write a book when you're still stuck and playing small.
Yeah. So if
And
people want to
you're
find
right.
you, how can they find you?
They can find me on Instagram right now at Tiffany Childers, Facebook. Um, I'm my website is currently in process.
Yes. Oh, exciting.
And everything's kind of currently in the works and getting there. So, I'm going to offer coaching in the near future, probably after the first of the year. Kind of a 12-week kind of reset.
And if people
Brief.
want to know more about loss, where would they go to find out if there's anything in their area?
Hang on just a second, because I just had that pulled up, that website that you need to go to. Sorry, I should have had that really. So you can go to www.lostteam.com and you can find the local chapters in your area, or you can contact any kind of local crisis center
Okay.
um, in
And
your
I
area.
will link all of those in the show notes for anyone that's
Yes.
listening. But
Yes.
I just cannot thank you enough for being vulnerable and courageous enough to share your story, but even more so to start not playing small, like start being big and bold and talking about it, because those are the reasons we will insist upon change. We will throw what currently is or what has always been that status quo on its head and say nope, not today. So thank
Hey,
you so much, Tiffany.
thank you, Corey. You were amazing, and I so enjoyed this conversation.
Until next time, my friends.